I don't know how that really circles back to, having an orgasm while competing or in the gym, or where in the fuck I was even going with this answer to begin with. Oh,
Get the fuck up. Simon says, get the fuck up. Throw your hands in the sky.
I don't know if there's any, data to support the effects of, having an orgasm before, during, or after training, but I can say with certainty that I've known guys that I've competed with and against who have gotten laid during meets. So it certainly didn't hurt them, because they broke PRs. So I mean, I guess they broke PRs in many ways, but if it hurt them, I don't know how it actually hurt them, unless maybe it took 5 pounds off a lift. But here I just said that I would give my whole dick for 10 pounds off a lift. So I don't know how that really circles back to, having an orgasm while competing or in the gym, or where in the fuck I was even going with this answer to begin with. Oh, the state of your state of arousal in the gym. There is a if you want to Google it, there's a peak arousal curve. I don't know if that's the actual name of it, but it's more dealing with the emotional state or the aggressive state or arousal state, of an athlete, and how it plays into training. And interesting enough, we were just discussing this the other day, in that a lot of people are under the misconception that certain state, because it's a bell curve, so you don't want to be way down here where there's no arousal at all, but at the same time, you don't want to be over the edge and become too aroused, where you're too hyped up, you're too psyched up to even function properly. But it seems there's a misconception that you're going to fall somewhere on this bell curve throughout that whole lift, and that's not exactly the way that I would define it, and that's not the way that I try to work with people if they're doing a lift or a max effort lift or a competitive lift. Using the squat as an example, the first thing that you have to assume is that their technique is at a state to where it can go on autopilot, where you don't have to worry that much about their technique, that they've done their job as far as their training goes, their mental cues, and so their technique is going to be on point. So you don't have to worry about that. From that standpoint, personally, what's worked for me and what I've tried to help with other people is to be able to get into, on that bell curve, the peak arousal state you can get in from the time they hit the chalk box until they grab the bar. So the state of aggressiveness is very high. Now, if they're going to internalize that as somebody like, some of you may not know, but Rob Fusner was one I used to train with that would internalize in that way. Or if they were going to externalize it, somebody like Chuck Vogelpohl or some other ones. Chad Ikes was one that was extremely externalizing it. Then as soon as they grab the bar and they get underneath it, that arousal state needs to drop. It needs to come down a little bit so they can focus on what they're doing, but not so much that they actually know really where they are, and that state of consciousness isn't exactly normalized. It's still aroused, but it's down enough that they can focus on foot position, making sure their back is in the right spot, making sure that their air is pulled into the right place, making sure that everything is in the position it needs to be able to get the bar out of the rack or to be able to walk out. Regardless of if they use a monolift or if they walk out, that arousal state is going to change again once they're in position and they're given a squat command. When they're given the squat command, that arousal state is going to click up a little bit. The way I like to explain it is the arousal state, when you hit the chalk box, everything is in your head. It's like this big fucking burning fire of aggression that's in your head. and you're ready, you're like a machine, you're just ready to fucking destroy anything. Then as soon as you grab the bar, that arousal state begins to move from your head and it starts to go down, and I would visualize and picture it going down into my belly, into my diaphragm, into my core. And I would hold it in my core, and that was a cue that I would use to be able to get my torso out, against the belt, in all degrees. And I've explained this before in a different table talk, as far as if people say you push out in your belt, back in your belt, whatever the fuck it is, the whole thing, just, it all has to blow up. So that aggression, while getting under the bar, is in my head. And then as I'm squatting down, and it's clicked down and it's moved into my belly, torso, it just builds as I squat down. So the aggression state isn't really at a peak, it's a couple clicks back, but it's also down into my torso. And then as soon as I get the up command, or I start to come back up, that aggression state clicks past peak arousal, so further than what it should be, like a fucking volcano, and just explodes. And then it moves from my torso back up into my chest and into my head, and then coming back up. That's what worked for me, because rarely did anything ever happen to me on the way up. If it was going to happen, it was going to happen getting set up or squatting down. But on the way up, it was never going to happen. But some of that is because I clicked back that arousal state after I was given the squat command enough to be able to focus on where my body position is, where my knees are, where my hips are, where everything is. So that way when I hit the hole and I hit where I was going to come back up at, everything was in the position it needed to be in. If it wasn't, then I wasn't coming back up. If the chest was too far forward or the knees came in or whatever it was, and I screwed up on the way down, I knew the lift wasn't going to happen before I even hit the hole. So if I kept everything by focusing and cueing in the right position, then I was able to click that back up. So when it comes to that arousal state that you're speaking about, that's going to change throughout a lift. It's not going to be a certain state that you're going to hit from chalk box until you leave the bar. You have to learn how to master it throughout the phases of the entire lift. So techniques for doing that, everybody's different. You have to experiment. Some people, visualization works real well. Some people, music works real well. Some people, positive reinforcement. Other people, negative reinforcement. Everybody's different. We're all have different backgrounds. We all have different triggers. You got to figure out what that trigger is for yourself. And if you're a coach working with an athlete, you got to try to figure out what that trigger is for them, because not every athlete is going to be the same. Some will respond to negative triggers. Some will respond to positive triggers. You have to figure that out. But as an athlete yourself, it's your responsibility to figure out what works for you, as well, because ultimately you're going to be the one that's under the bar.